Live from London, this is the Sunday Morning Breakfast Show with Sobia Iqbal on Teachers Talk Radio.
Good morning. You're listening to Sobia Stellar Sunday. It's Sunday, the 22nd of August. We have the best conversations coming your way. Do EU companies banning employees wearing headscarves have impact on Muslim girls and women in education? How do we support students and staff with what's happening in Afghanistan and coaching burnt out teachers and helping if they've decided to leave the profession altogether? It's another thrilling morning. Prepare for takeoff.
Live from London, this is the Sunday Morning Breakfast Show with Sobia Iqbal on Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live on the Podbean app or desktop player. Just head over to www.podbean.com/LSW/TT Radio or search Teachers Talk Radio. Follow the hashtag TT Radio.
I'm looking for an active discussion today, so if you feel you have something to contribute, do call in using the icon at the bottom, which will bring you into the studio. Or you can tweet at Sobia Stella S or at TT Radio 2021. We're going to come back in just a moment. Right, welcome back. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to my first guest, Sobia Ba. I'm just going to check she's connected because we have had technical issues. And just to warn you in advance, we are going to have some technical problems today. Sobia, hello, are you there?
Hi, yes, I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you loudly and clearly. Sobia, we have
Lovely. We do. It's so strange saying hello, Sobia. I feel slightly senile, but then again, it's a bit strange for me. But it's lovely to meet another Sobia.
Yeah, definitely. I thought I was unique, but clearly I'm not. Right, Sobia, welcome to the show. How have you been?
Thank you. I've been very well, thank you, and thank you very much for having me.
No problem. Can you tell us a bit about yourself and your career history? Because obviously people don't know who you are. Just tell us what your role is and what do you do?
Yeah, so currently I am the head of essential skills at Morley College in North Kensington in London. Essential skills encompasses, so we've got ESOL, English, maths and digital skills within that sort of unit. And I manage that department. Historically, I have been an English teacher, psychology teacher, sociology. Started off in secondary schools and then progressed into the FE sector. Taught across a range of curriculums, both GCSE, A levels, and some access learners also. And then somehow found myself in middle management, and here I am today.
Brilliant. And Sobia, the reason why I invited you onto this show is because obviously we're going to be discussing a very sensitive topic today, which is all about the hijab, and it's a bit about how to support Muslim girls and women in education, and obviously what's happening in Afghanistan as well. So I'm going to start off by asking some basic questions because not everybody knows about the hijab and what it's there for. So could you just tell us some basic things? What is a hijab and why do Muslim women wear it?
Yeah, absolutely. So the hijab is either it can be described as a hair covering or a head covering for Muslim women. And we say Muslim women, however, I think the practice of head covering and hair coverings historically hasn't only been through Abrahamic religions. I think in both non and Abrahamic religions, it's a common practice. But it's the idea of the woman has a choice as an individual to separate what she defines as something she would like to keep in her personal life and what she chooses to share with the public life. And it's a symbolic representation of her modesty and her choice and her values and belief and how she wishes to express that. So that's what the hijab is.
And so the question that a lot of people have, because I know a lot of students ask me the same question as well,
Mhm.
why do some Muslim women choose not to wear it? Because you see loads of Muslim women, some are wearing it, some aren't. What's
Yeah.
the reason behind that?
I think the fundamental understanding of the hijab needs to be that it's choice. And that's the key word here, that an individual woman has a choice of whether she wishes to show her values and beliefs in this manner or she doesn't. And if it's something that she feels as though isn't part of her value system or isn't essential to it, then by no means is it something that is forced upon. So again, it's about choice and also it's about individual interpretations. I think we also must understand that religion is a personal thing. And individuals have personal interpretations of what it means to them and how they wish to express it.
Yeah, I would agree. Like, I'm going to give you a bit of brief history of myself.
Mhm.
This was going back years ago now. I was brought up in a moderately religious family. Religion has always been there in the background. It was never forced upon me, neither the religion nor the covering of my hair. So wearing a hijab was never
Mhm.
forced on me. My mum does
Yeah.
wear the hijab, and I did wear it. When I was younger. And I wore
Mhm.
it for 3 years, I think. And at that time, I was probably closest to my religion. But then I also
Mhm.
took it off as well. So for me, it kind of,
Mhm.
I wasn't as practicing, and then therefore didn't feel the need to wear it. But I do agree with you that religion is a very personal thing, and it is
Mm.
up to the individual to decide when they're wearing it and whether they choose to wear it or
Yeah.
not. Um, and obviously I have loads of students asking me that question all the time, and I
Yeah.
sit there thinking maybe staff feel like that as well, because sometimes when
Mm.
you're in a staff room or when you're in a working environment, people can't really ask you these questions, can they?
Yeah, I think they do find it quite challenging. And I think your example there of students asking is something so common as somebody who, is physically quite visibly Muslim with her hijab. I often get questioned indirectly by my young learners. And it often comes from male learners. So these young men often ask me. I remember this one encounter I had. It was quite funny actually. The young man came in and we were having an English lesson, and he goes to me, "Miss, I know bare young Muslim girls who don't wear a hijab. In it, they're going to hell." And I just, I couldn't. I was really trying to hold my laughter in at that moment in time. But I thought that was a really important discussion to have. And I thought, right, this young learner is clearly asking me a really important question. He's quite curious about it, but perhaps doesn't have the language to articulate it. So I said, well, why do Muslim women wear it in the first place? And he didn't know. So we had the discussion about how it's choice, and why it's worn. And then I said, um, do we judge people by the way they dress? He goes, nah, miss, we can't do that. I said, then who are we to suggest whether somebody is going to go to hell or not? And it was just immediate. Right, I understand that now. So we are in no place to say whether somebody is religious or unreligious or the extent of their belief based on their physical appearance. And the same thing applies to the hijab. A hijab wearing or non-hijab wearing woman, their ideals, their values, and their beliefs, and how religious they are, so to speak, cannot be measured with whether they wear a hijab or not. So these
Yeah, I would agree
conversations are
with.
important.
Yeah, they're important to have. I mean, I agree with what you've just said, that you can't measure someone's religion based on what they're wearing, because obviously, even though the hijab is important in our religion, you just don't know what is in someone's heart. And that belief is important
Exactly.
in our religion, that we cannot judge
Yeah.
people. And it's up to, obviously, God to judge what our actions are and what we're doing. So I'm going to ask you another controversial question, and I hope you don't mind.
Okay.
Do you
No, of
feel
course not.
do you feel oppressed when wearing the hijab?
Absolutely not. So the word oppression suggests that somehow I've been suffering some cruel, unjust treatment, or that I've been persecuted or abused or put in some type of maltreatment. Whereas the fundamental principle of my hijab is, the hijab is my yin and yang. It's the center of me. It's my identity. So to suggest that somehow my identity is a form of my oppression is completely contradictory, and in an actual sense, quite offensive in many respects as well. So in short, no, I don't.
And so why do you think the hijab has become so controversial, do you think? And I'm just going to clarify this for people who've just joined us. The hijab is the head covering that we're discussing this morning. Why do you think, Sobia, the hijab has become so controversial?
I think the hijab has always been controversial. And in order for us to understand why, we need to look at where this stems from. And where has this narrative begun? The narrative has begun colonial, sort of pre-colonial narratives of women. If, for example, we take the instances of Algeria during 1830, we take India, for example, and then we compare this to Europe. During colonial periods of time, the representation of women was almost done through the scale of civilization. It was known as 3 separate scales of civilization. And it was the idea that these new cultures that colonial states were being exposed to weren't interpreted. They weren't understood. They were just viewed and then interpreted through what is known as, the Eurocentric lens, or the white male lens. And what we have is this scale of civilization, and it's gone through these 3 stages of the less you wear, the more civilized you are in terms of women. So you've got women in Algeria who were deemed, because they covered sort of up the most, they were the most uncivilized. Then you had India, where they covered, but to a lesser extent, they were a little bit more civilized. And then you had European women who covered, in comparison, covered less than those other 2 locations, and they were the most civilized. And we had this narrative of the 3 stages of civilization occur. So it's really important to understand that this is a colonial narrative. It hasn't come away and gone and fluctuated. It is very much the same, stayed consistent, and perhaps changed through terminology throughout time. So that's the first thing to understand, its history and where this sort of narrative stems from. The second thing is, well, where are we now, and how has this narrative been exploring through modernity? Current times, for example, we look at the Tokyo Olympics, I think is probably the most relevant. The Tokyo Summer Olympics, we had so much controversy in terms of what women were wearing. We had an example of the Norwegian women's beach handball team, who decided that they didn't want to wear, the very short brief knickers. They wanted to wear short shorts, and they were fined by the European Handball Federation. So this wasn't by the Olympic Commission, but the European Handball Federation, for breaching conduct there, because they weren't allowed to wear short shorts. So there is this narrative of constancy of what women can wear and what women can't wear. We also had Germany's women gymnast team, who said, well, you let the men wear full leotards, why can't we? So they turned up in full leotards. And there was so much drama and, oh my goodness, what is this? When the issuing of soul caps. So this is I'm using terminology. The Soul Cap is the company that made swimming head caps for women with afro hairs to wear during the Olympics. There was so much controversy about whether this would be allowed or not allowed. So I feel like this narrative may have started hundreds of years ago, all across the globe. A very colonial narrative, a very controlling sort of white male lens as to what women can and can't wear, has seeped through history. And here we are, 200-300 years later, and the same things are being said about what women can and cannot wear.
So I'm just going to stop you there then, Sobia. So my question to you is, do you think that the hijab has just become weaponized and used as a tool for the West to show that they liberated women from religious oppression and seclusion.
Yes, absolutely. As it has been in history used against women in general to to control what they can and can't wear, and to demonize other cultures, other norms, and to push forward a narrative of this is what civilization is. So I think yes.
So coming back to that idea of civilization, I'm just going to mention um, so, for example, people's languages, values, and practices are an improvement on the lives of those who are colonized in terms of when we're discussing civilization. To
Mhm.
me, it sounds very much because obviously I'm British born and bred and I am a British Muslim. To me, it just seems like the old way of advertising, of policing what women can and can't wear, regardless of what the agenda is.
Yes, that's exactly what has happened. What you have is when the news of the controversy around hijab and where it should be worn and banned, and just this whole political scale and the way that it's portrayed in the media arises, often you have the interpretation that this is Islamophobia, that this is an issue for Muslim women. Well, in actual fact, it's just an extension of the oppression of women in general across the world. It's a women issue. It's an issue for all women, because today it's the hijab. Yesterday it was, you know, beach shorts. It was swimming caps. It was gymnastic leotards. What is it going to be next? I think is the question.
Okay, Sobia. So I'm just going to go through a bit of background history with the EU, so for our listeners, so that they understand this. The reason why I'm mentioning the EU, because obviously I had a comment in from a senior lecturer who said that basically his daughter's school, the teachers describe whenever they're talking about the hijab, they always mention Saudi Arabia, but they never mentioned France. And so I'm just going to go through this. So France have banned girls under 18 from wearing hijab in public. And the proposed anti-separatism bill also states that mothers who come onto school trips wouldn't be allowed to wear the hijab. And also they're thinking, or they have banned the burkini as well. Now, the burkini, for people who don't know, is beachwear. It's basically full covering. You can only see hands and feet. It's similar to what I wear, which is lycra top and lycra leggings. It's just basically you're just covering yourself. And for some people, like Sobia, my namesake says, for some people they say that this is Islamophobia, and obviously this contributed to a huge backlash from Muslim women who are arguing that it was xenophobic and discrimination on social media. And so I found this article from Times Magazine, and in the Times Magazine it said that French politicians argued that laws restricting religious symbolism are in service of women's empowerment and safety. And I would have to agree with Sobia for a minute, because when I'm looking back into British history and I'm looking to European history, I remember women used to dress modestly. So for me, I found it strange as well. However, there was a huge social media backlash, and there was a hashtag trend called hashtag hands off my hijab, which was started by a Somalian Norwegian model called Rhoda Mohammed. And it was backed by US Congresswoman Ilhan Omar and fencer Ibtihaj Mohammed, who also backed the campaign. And I agree with what Sobia is saying. I think sometimes things do get taken out of context and used as a political weapon. In this article, it also went on to say, from an associate professor of sociology at McGill University in the US, that Alia Al-Saji said that banning the hijab is about colonialism. And she goes on to explain that French colonization of Muslim countries, which was about controlling and managing populations that were of diverse religions. And the hijab was a way of clearly showing you were a Muslim, which is a colonially constructed as being opposed to colonialism. And it's also a site of potential resistance, because like you mentioned earlier, in Algeria it was a symbol of resistance. So Muslim Algerians, for example, were not eligible for French citizenship unless they renounced their religion and culture and adopted a French identity. So for me, it sounds like history is just repeating itself, but just in a political way.
Absolutely. And it's not just a repetition of history, it is an extension of it. And we take France. I think France is a very relevant example for us, living in the EU, but also in terms of its political turmoil that it's under currently, not just with its home politics, but its international politics as well. France is an example of colonialism that has continued, that has evolved into more. Algeria is a perfect example of this. They've had over hundreds of years of colonization, and from the French government. They're an example of, yes, resistance, but also there used to be this practice amongst the French colonizers whereby they used to line up women, covered women, so Muslim women who had decided to wear the hijab, and they used to have these ceremonies of where they used to be embracing civilization and embracing the colonization by having their headscarves removed. And it'll be removed by French female officers. And then they would be, celebrated as being civilized. So if this practice happened almost, 150, 200 years ago, what has changed now? Not much, I'm afraid. I'm afraid there is a long way to go.
Okay, so let's go back onto this issue of coming back to identity. Now, we talk a lot about identity in schools a lot. And when I look at the definition of identity, it's the collective aspect of the set of characteristics by which a person is recognized. And if we're looking at the characteristics of identity, religion falls into that section. So, yeah. My question again is the same question, because if I'm going back and I'm leaving all the politics out of this, why are politicians who are men defining Muslim women and their dress, which is no different to marketing and advertising agencies and other men who've constantly policed what women are wearing or choosing not to wear? And so for me, I don't know about you, but this causes a conflict for my students when I'm teaching them, because for me, I feel that there's a bit of intersectionality here where I have to find out my students' identities and make sure that I'm catering for them and acknowledge the intersecting identity. So for example, they're British, they're female, and they're Muslims. And as a teacher, I can either empower my students or I can oppress my students depending on the way that I choose to teach and see them. I don't want to have to lower the self-esteem and confidence of my girls. But for some reason, there is this massive conflict within society, which means that it's contributing to that lack of self-esteem and confidence. What do you think about that?
I think you're exactly right. And I think the idea that something that happens or that is decided by a group of by a group of men in politics deciding what women can and cannot wear is a women's right issue, first and foremost. And I think it's really important that we are empowering all our female students, regardless of what their religion or ethnicity is. We need to empower all our female students and our women as to what their rights are and what equality looks like. But the challenge that you've highlighted there is something that I think as a Muslim woman as well, and having very much multicultural students from inner London, is that it's quite challenging to teach, for example, equality and diversity. And then the next thing you know on the news, a politician has gone back on what they said or has made a racial remark. And students come into class and, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to interrupt you there and say that I kind of agree with you there, because obviously we've got certain politicians in our country who've taken the mick out of women and compared them to letterboxes, for example. Exactly. And I don't see that, for me personally, as a British Muslim, I don't see that any different to when, for example, Theresa May was in power and the media was scrutinizing what she was wearing, what heels she was wearing, how she was dressed, what makeup she was wearing. And the same with other female politicians either. I don't see any difference. I feel that it's just a political tool that has been weaponized in order to suit a narrative or an agenda.
Absolutely. And it's so, as an educator, so take out the fact that, I'm a Muslim headscarf wearing woman. As an educator, it is so counterproductive for us to go into a class, teach about equality, teach about diversity, teach our young learners who are the future, essentially, that look, you cannot, the consequences of racism, the consequences of colonialism, the consequences of not treating people fairly. And then when they go out into the real world, or they turn their mobile phones on or switch the telly on, they're constantly bombarded by the media and, this instantaneity of social media, and the information that is coming from there completely contradicts what they're learning in the classroom. And it's such a heavy burden for teachers.
Yeah, it is. And I'm just going to quickly go through something, a definition of British values. So British values, the definition is democracy, the rule of law, individual liberty, and mutual respect and tolerance of different faiths and beliefs. And there is that conflict that we are having to deal with and navigate with our students and even our staff in some places. I'm going to take a quick question, Sobia, that I've just had messaged in. Somebody's asked, do you think there could be a link between banning the hijab and not wanting to take in migrants?
I think that banning the hijab is a direct attack on the freedoms of women and women's rights. And I think that the issue regarding migrants is a racial issue, a racial and cultural issue. But when you look deep down into the ratio of who these migrants are and the gender ratio, there always seems to be more women and children that bear the brunt of it in compared to the males. So there can be a correlation there, but I think they are also separate entities in their own right.
And so the reason why I brought this topic to the radio station was because I was concerned as a British Muslim myself. And I'm just going to go through some more information, Sobia. So basically, it did kind of get me thinking when this EU law came out, and they ruled that companies in the EU can now ban the wearing of the hijab, because immediately I thought to myself, well, I'm an educator, how is that going to impact my girls? And one of the things that did come out of that was, and we're going to discuss this a bit later on, but it was about the fact that we're talking about career opportunities and future employment, and talking about aspirations. And so I did loads of research on this, and I came across an article from Zubaydah Huq, who wrote it in 2018 for the TES. And Zubaydah works for the Runnymede Trust. And for those of you who don't know, the Runnymede Trust is an independent body for racism, and they also work for they also work alongside other organisations like the Police Force and other public sector organisations. And she said that, and I didn't know this, and a senior lecturer from the UEL messaged me yesterday saying the same thing, and I wasn't aware of this, but she said that some schools did ban the hijab and have started to ban the hijab like they have done in France. And I found that scary, because I thought to myself, well, firstly, schools shouldn't have done that because it should be a parental and student choice. And secondly, Zubaydah goes on to explain some things. And she says that in France in 2004, Muslim headscarves were banned from being worn in public schools. And then in 2010, the country prohibited full face veils like niqabs. So that's the full face veil, which covers the entire face. And that kind of took place in public spaces. And France was the first country in the EU with a nationwide ban. And then that's obviously led us on to the next thing, which is now companies can ban headscarves in order to present an image of neutrality. And that was ruled by the highest block of the EU. And I'm just going to quote something here. Their reasoning and rationality is that employers desire to pursue a policy of political, philosophical, and religious neutrality with regards to its customers of users. But I'm thinking, where's the freedom of thought there? And also, Zubaydah very rightly says that it's a contradiction of wearing either crosses at work or even the turban for other religions. What are your thoughts on that?
I think at the heart of it is, well, where does this, who's making these decisions? And you've mentioned here the EU, the highest ranking sort of um, organization that can pass laws. Yeah, the bloc. These are the same individuals that fined the Norwegian women's beach volleyball team for wearing shorts rather than knickers. I think that's the first thing to understand, is that there will consistently be double standards, there will consistently be hypocrisy, and women will always bear the brunt of decisions made by a very misogynistic system. In terms of Muslim women and the hijab, I think once again, it's sort of them going back to techniques and decisions and oppressive sort of dictator type laws that they've created during their colonial reigns, that they're now re-emerging and reinstalling through sort of neo-colonial methods. And this is one of them. Let's ban this because we did it before, and we don't want them to practice their culture and their religion, and we don't like it, which is the bottom line.
So, for example, in the EU, Germany have also banned headscarves for women at work, and a lot of it is in the public services. And the impact has been that trainee teachers who are coming into the profession, will be affected. Now, I read that and it scared me, because obviously I used to wear a hijab as well, and now I don't. For those of you who've just joined, I was explaining earlier on that I've come from a moderate religious family. I wasn't wearing a hijab, which is the scarf. I wore it for 3 years when I was very, very practicing, and then my faith kind of wavered, and then I stopped wearing it. And it's a very personal thing, and it's up to each woman to decide what she wants to do and how she wants to present herself. And it made me think that I was still a teacher when I was wearing a hijab and when I wasn't wearing a hijab. And I was the same teacher. It didn't interfere with my ability to do my job. So Zubaida actually says in this article that it's a form of legalized discrimination. And she also says, because there was a time when Ofsted were actually looking at uniform and the way that students should be dressed in schools. And she said that there was no evidence that hijab holds women back. And it was sending a message to Muslim parents that they cannot be trusted with the welfare and personal development of their children. And it was the complete opposite of British values. And final thing that she said, which I thought was so important, that the Equality Act in 2010 makes it illegal for any public body to discriminate for religious purposes. So this form of legalized discrimination is not on.
Absolutely not. And once again, here we have an example of hypocrisy and double standards. Laws are being made, and then laws are being broken and not followed, or adapted to suit the needs of whatever narrative they wish to roll out to the masses.
Okay, so my next question is, when the courts ruled that companies in the EU can ban the wearing of the hijab, and now that that schools have started doing it as well in our neighboring countries, and also it's happened in some schools in this country, how does that make you feel as a wearer of a hijab?
I think there's two sort of two reactions there. There's sort of, oh my goodness, not this again sort of narrative. And the second is a great sense of, I know that a lot of teachers and a lot of hijab wearing young students as well will feel quite alienated. And I think there is, personally, I just consistently feel like it's more of the same, and that I start to question, when will we stop being viewed from this colonial misogynistic lens? But at the same time, as an educator, my reaction is, my goodness, we really need to reinforce how important women's rights are in Europe, and that it's not some isolated phenomenon in some distant part of the world, which we often label or use the language of developing world. It's very much here in the now where we are. So I think there's quite a few layers of reactiveness there, and it's quite an emotively high issue because of the link between religion and how personal it is. So when a religion is attacked in this way or demonized in this manner, regardless of which religion it is, it automatically has the humanistic reaction of, oh my God, I am being picked on, I am being persecuted, I am being oppressed, I am being unjustly treated this way because of my religion. Because often what you will see is that individuals think that I am my religion and my religion is me. So that's, you have a very emotionally high response to that.
So Sobia, I've had some messages come in. Tom's messaged in saying the word tolerance, he doesn't like it. It implies that there's something wrong about what you're tolerating, which is a good point. Tom also, another Tom, said, taking France as an example, isn't it more a secularism issue, not allowing anything across the board? So basically it's not just for Islam, it's just a religion across the board. And Noreen says banning the hijab in the West is the same as Taliban forcing women wearing the hijab. Why do we object to the latter and not the former? That's a very good question.
Yeah, just going back to second Tom's question about secularization, he's quite right. It is about secularization, but in secularization, it is the notion that everyone is equal and that everybody has the same sort of objectiveness. However, when you isolate and you demonize one sort of culture or religion, then it's completely counterproductive. It's no longer secularization. So that's the first thing. And I think for some strange reason, France has an obsession with Muslim women. I don't know what it is. I do. It is colonialism and it is a power trip for them. However,
but Sobia, we've just mentioned that it's not just France. There are other countries who are doing it as well.
This is exactly, this is what it is. This is another thing, that it's not just France anymore. We talk about France because I think it's very hyped up, so to speak, in the media. However, there are other countries that are doing it. And sometimes they do it quite discreetly and sometimes not so discreetly.
And also, just to stop you there, Noreen's made a very good point. So I hope you don't mind me stopping you there because we are running out of time.
Of course not.
Noreen said that there's something from history. Lady Willingdon, who was the governor's wife in colonial India, asked an ADC to bring Rati Jinnah a shawl in case she felt cold. A slim excuse to cover a blouse the governor's prim wife felt was too low cut. At that, Jinnah rose from his seat and told the governor's wife that when Mrs. Jinnah feels cold, she will say so and ask for a wrap herself. And that he led his wife out of the dinner and henceforth refused all other invitations to Government House. So basically, it's that concept of telling a woman what she should and shouldn't be wearing in front of other people as well. We've already had this question, Rabia, what does the wearing of does what we wear impact the quality of our teaching? We've had that question already. Going back to some of the other things, let's look at our teachers and our students. Sobia, can you just tell us, we already know that there is this alienation that's taking part because obviously students are becoming either withdrawn or they're not feeling they belong to our society and they're feeling alienated. How can teachers have those conversations with students without getting in trouble for it? Because I know that some of my white colleagues and non-Muslim colleagues have asked me, how can I have this conversation without me getting in trouble with it or causing offense? That's the first thing. Should teachers be having these conversations with their students, and should we be communicating with families in a much better way? What are your thoughts?
The conversation needs to take place. The reason why the conversation needs to take place is because it directly impacts our learners. That's the first. That's at the core of it. If something impacts our learners, we need to be talking about it. How it's spoken about, in order to not, so to speak, get in trouble or cause offense to everybody that is concerned, is that there needs to be some direction from management. There needs to be involvement of the equality and diversity team. That needs to be then shared throughout the whole educational institution. It needs to be a collective narrative. It can't be a discussion that happens once a week or just on the spur of the moment because it's come up in the news. We now need to do a lesson on it. Those types of reactiveness often put a double burden on our teachers who are already underpaid and overworked. Time is so precious to our teachers. These types of decisions, they need to be given clear, directive, supportive plans to say, look, this has occurred within a certain community, and we would like to demonstrate our support or for our young learners if they are concerned in this way. And in terms of offense, I think this is where language plays a key part. What language are we using? Because often our learners come up with the most, what we would say, obscene ways of expressing themselves, are quite rude or politically incorrect, but it's only because they don't know the language of how to express themselves. So I think there needs to be a clarity around language, because I think all things can be said within the parameters of mannerism. So that, I think, is the way that we need to move forward.
I've had another message coming in saying that celebrating all festivals in schools and allowing students to wear their cultural outfits as well as their students, so staff and students. This is something the school that this person worked in to put in place, and it's the 30-year-old teacher, which is Rabia, to support integration and understanding, and it worked very well. So yeah, it's all about basically making sure that there is diversity, not just for obviously Muslims, but for every single culture and religion that's in the school and all the languages that are spoken. And then Tom's also messaged in saying he doesn't know if it's the French being on a power trip, but I think many French people are, right or wrong, concerned about classical French values, including liberalism, equality for women being diluted, etc. So, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just listening to the comments.
Okay, right. So obviously, we know we've discussed this in depth now. And if you would like to find out more research about that, you can go and find some information. It's all over the internet right now. And I would recommend the Runnymede Trust as well. For those of you who don't know, I'll tweet it out later on today. The Runnymede Trust is an organization to help you have these kind of conversations within your schools and with your students as well, if you need to. We're going to move on quickly to Afghanistan, and we don't have a lot of time left, but we know this is a highly political issue. And unfortunately, I'm not here for politics today. So I've made it clear that today is very sensitive. We're not here for politics. We're just talking about how it impacts on education and our students and our staff. So moving on to Afghanistan, we know it's a highly political issue. I saw this image on social media, which depicted a Muslim woman suddenly disappearing behind the hijab. And I wanted to know from you, as a hijab wearer, have you ever felt like you disappeared once you started wearing the hijab?
Absolutely not. I decided to wear my hijab when I was very young, and I made a decision that I wanted to try it out. And I said to my mum, I want to try wearing my hijab to school today. I think I was perhaps maybe in reception, maybe year one. It was many years ago. And I saw my mum wearing it. And she said, it's up to you. Are you sure you want to have a go? And she said, yeah. I said, yeah, I'd like to try it. And I've never taken it off since. My hijab is my identity. It is, as I've said before, it's my yin and yang. It's the center of me. It's my core belief. It's everything that I believe in is in that representation of my hijab. I cannot imagine myself without it. And I am often, identified through it, particularly when you're on the other side of the, of the building, and somebody comes to see you and they'll be like, right, you need to go see Sobia. And they often say, okay, what does Sobia look like? And you're like, the hijab wearing Sobia, she's down the hall across there. So I'm often identified by it as well, which is brings me great joy. My hijab brings me great peace. And I've never felt like that. And I think if women at some point do feel like that, then there is definitely, they need to speak about it. And I think then the choice that perhaps maybe it wasn't their choice to wear it, and that perhaps they need to question, well, what does make them happy? Because I think inner peace and mental health is so important for everyone.
And so clearly what's happening in Afghanistan is distressing. With regards to women's education, how do you feel about what's happened over there, and what do you think is going to happen next?
I think women play a fundamental role in every single part of the world, and no society, no country can function to its capacity or to its best, both socially and economically, if women are not involved. There is a saying that no nation can rise to the height of glory unless your women are side by side with you. That was said by Muhammad Ali Jinnah, the founder of the Islamic Republic of Pakistan. And it's quite right. You cannot function as a society, and you cannot develop economically or socially unless women have equal opportunity, and it doesn't matter where you are in the world.
Thank you. And just to finish off, the government have announced, and this is the UK government, they have announced that we will be taking in approximately 5,000 refugees from Afghanistan under a bespoke resettlement route. And this was published on the 18th of August of 2021. So if you do want to find out more, you can go to the gov.uk, which I will post up on LinkedIn, on Twitter as well. And eventually we are going to be taking in a total of 20,000 refugees. And it does say that the whole point of doing this is because obviously priority is going to be given to women and girls and religious and other minorities who are most at risk of human rights abuses and dehumanizing treatment by the Taliban. Sobia, how are we going to support students and staff who either have families over in Afghanistan or have been affected by the issues occurring? And obviously we're going to have refugees in our classrooms. How are we going to deal with this?
I think having experienced sort of the Afghanistan war has been going on for 20 years. You've had the Syrian war for 10 years, and likewise in Iraq also. So having worked in inner London, I've had quite quite a few years experience of learners who are refugees coming into my classroom. And from that experience, I can share that the first and foremost, we need to understand the trauma that these young people have gone through. Trauma-informed learning is really important, because what it does, we are taking away the idea of sympathy and including empathy, which is what they need. A lot of learners are quite reactive when they hear or see people feeling sorry for them. They don't want people to feel sorry for them. They want people to support them. They want to feel confident and supported within their learning environment. And it's really important to have the conversation with the learner as to what their aspirations and what their dreams are, to not impose our own interpretations of success and achievement on the learner, but more having the conversation of, well, what would you like to do? I remember speaking to several learners during the Syrian refugee crisis who'd come into my class, and they were very well articulated learners who English wasn't their first language, very ambitious, conscientious individuals. That's a common trait that I found amongst our refugee learners. They really would like to do well, and it doesn't matter what their starting point is or how marginal their gains are. And they all had a very similar narrative, was that I would like to be an engineer, I'd like to be a construction engineer or an oil engineer, or I'd like to be a doctor or a nurse. And when you ask them why they chose to be that particular profession, the response was, I want to go back to my country and improve it.
Yeah, exactly.
So
I've
I
had
think
that
it's
experience as
really,
well.
yeah, absolutely. 9 out of 10 times the learner will say to you, I want to go back to my country and I want to improve it. I'm here just to finish my education. I'm here to get the skills I need to go back to build it. So they are very resilient young people who have aspirations, who have dreams, perhaps can't articulate it in the same way as our British English first speaking learners can because of the language barrier, but they have an immense ambition. And I think we need to understand where the trauma is coming from. And I'm not implying here there needs to be an added layer of CPD or anything like that. I think what needs to be involved is often, or how I've had positive support, is from local councils and the ALS department. And just having a little bit of context to that learner that this is what their situation is, whether they have become refugees with their family or what we call unaccompanied minors. So there needs to be a conversation and an understanding of what this trauma is, and supporting the learner's aspirations regardless of what they are.
Yeah, and I would agree with, sorry, I would just add on to what you've just said. In terms of students who've had trauma, they do have some of them may have disturbing memories, and seeing it on the news brings it back. So it's really important to make sure that you use your external agencies for counselling and therapy where needed, and also not to push students. So if they don't feel like talking, not pushing them for information, but also don't ignore their concerns, and don't assume that no response means not to check in with them. And then I've had a few messages coming in saying that sometimes these students can be put into mainstream classes with just a dictionary given to them, which is not great. We need to support them properly. Otherwise, they can obviously develop resentment, and they can become isolated and alienated. And that is really, really, really important. So making sure you keep your routines, providing opportunities for staff and students to reconnect, heal, feel safe and supported. And I think that's the main important part, to just listen, be there for them. And Sobia, the way that you've just mentioned all that has been fantastic. So thank you so much for doing that.
Thank you very much for having me.
That's absolutely fine. I just want to finish off by just saying a few things, that it is important for us to be having these conversations. And I find that sometimes staff are not willing to have these conversations because they don't know how to, not because they don't want to, but they don't want to offend anyone. I remember when I was sitting in a staff room in the current school that I'm working in, and I had some staff ask me why some students were saying that it was not right to listen to music or play music. And they obviously didn't know, so they didn't know how to approach anyone. It was just a casual conversation in the staff room. And I just explained to them that there are different schools of thought, and the best thing to do is just to explain to them that in this classroom we are going to be learning music, and if they've got an issue, just contact the parents and discuss it with the parents individually. And the best thing to do is to talk to staff who are Muslims, who will be able to support you with those conversations and those things that are happening. You just said that we don't need additional training for this as an add-on. I do think that at the beginning of the year we do need some sort of training when we're dealing with this kind of issue, not just as a one-off but throughout the year as well. I think it's ongoing, and yes, you can get support from your inclusion unit, but also you can get support from your academy, and also like you said, the local authority as well, to make sure that our students are supported as best as we can. Sobia, what's next for you? What are your plans?
My plans are to return to a very busy start of an academic year at my college, and help my learners with their enrollment, and hopefully a good start to their academic year. I'm quite excited. We have a 89% ratio of women in our college, and we're really looking forward to getting them onto a course and helping them improve their life chances.
Brilliant. Sobia, it's been very, very insightful and useful for many people, I'm sure, today, because you've probably answered a lot of questions. It's a very, very sensitive topic. So thank you so much for coming on to Teachers Talk Radio to discuss this topics in a sensitive way. I really do appreciate it. And there was also some stuff in there that I wasn't aware of. So thank you for highlighting it and bringing it to my attention, because now I'm going to go back into my school and I'm going to be looking at some of the things that I can do for my students. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Right. Thanks. Bye. Right. Next up, we have Joe Howard. We're going to be discussing how to support staff heal from burnout and find the confidence to leave the classroom. We're going to come back after the news.
Creative Resources, made for teachers by teachers. At Creative Resources, we've been rethinking what a classroom can be. We've created a huge range of more than 2,500 original and exciting resources that span across more than 15 different subject areas. Whether you're looking for primary or secondary level resources, careers options, PSHE, arts or humanities, Creative Resources have the resources for you. We offer full curriculum packages and unique, challenging escape rooms themed on topics such as Shakespeare, Tudors, and fractions. We have quizzes, task cards, Tarsier puzzles, and lots more. Better still, more than 100 resources can be accessed for free. Just visit our website www.cre8tiveresources.com. You can get 10% off any order you make on our website by using the discount code TTRadio. Creative Resources, made for teachers by teachers. Every teacher loves stationery, right? Imagine getting a selection of fun, beautiful and unique stationery items designed and selected especially for teachers, delivered through your door every month. You need to check out teacherslovestationery.club.
I'm always so excited when the box arrives. It's such a treat.
My Teachers Love Stationery Club box is just a little treat to myself every month.
It's always full of delightful and surprising items, including some really good quality stationery brands like Faber-Castell and Stabilo.
And because you never know what you're going to get, it makes it even more fun and special when you get it.
It feels really great to be supporting a family business that's run by real teachers. I can't help feeling like they just know what I'm going to enjoy using stationery-wise better than I do myself.
Visit teacherslovestationery.club and enter the code TTRadio when you buy your first stationery box to save £2 today. teacherslovestationery.club. Introducing the Leadership Masterclass series by Diana Osagi. Learn how to ditch your fears and develop your leadership confidence. How to deal with difficult colleagues. How to thrive when you lead in a challenging environment. And how to get colleagues to buy into your vision. Join Diana for her online leadership masterclasses starting on the 10th of July and running all the way through the summer. These sessions are the perfect way to prepare and refresh for the next academic year and beyond. Book your place at courageousleadership.co.uk/events now. The first 50 leaders to sign up get an additional free mini coaching session with Diana herself. Don't miss this. Courageous Leadership Masterclasses at courageousleadership.co.uk/events. This is Teachers Talk Radio, and this is Teachers Talk Radio News.
A UK university has become the first in the country to make COVID vaccination mandatory for students, according to a report in The Telegraph. Hartpury University and College in Gloucester released a statement on its website stating that COVID-19 measures for the coming academic year included the expectation that all eligible students will engage and take up vaccinations as soon as they are given the opportunity. The statement later goes on to say that it is a mandatory requirement that all eligible students in on-site residential accommodation will engage in the COVID-19 vaccination programme and have both doses. The statement further points out the likelihood that students without proof of vaccination will be limited in terms of access to social events and venues on the campus. Although the statement says that this is in line with the national picture, where vaccinations proof may be required for all adults wishing to access entertainment or hospitality venues. The statement, however, does also make it clear that the requirement does not apply to students who cannot have the vaccine due to medical exemptions. As schools and colleges across England and Wales begin preparation for the return of pupils, students in the Channel Island of Guernsey have learned that they must have a COVID test before returning in September. According to ITV Channel Island News, the tests have been introduced by Public Health to try and reduce the spread of the virus in schools. Pupils, teachers and school staff will be supplied with packs of lateral flow tests, and these will be dispatched to home addresses from Monday the 23rd of August. Anyone returning to schools is asked to complete 2 tests, one no later than the day before they go back. The report also suggests that while States of Guernsey is expecting some COVID cases in schools, it is trying to keep numbers low through testing. Away from the pandemic, Further Education Week is reporting on the DfE decision to refuse a petition calling for it to back down from defunding BTECs. The petition itself was started by the Sixth Form Colleges Association. In an official response, the DfE says it is streamlining and improving the quality of post-16 qualifications. It goes on to say that some BTECs may qualify for funding in the future, provided they meet new criteria. The DfE is looking to introduce a twin-track system where most pupils will pursue either A-levels or T-levels. In the response, the DfE focused on the need for students to enter the workforce well equipped to progress to further training or to get a skilled job, particularly as the country recovers from the economic impact of the pandemic.
Right, I'm going to stop there today. We've got loads of technical issues happening, so I apologise for that rude interruption that I made during the news, during the advert. This is the benefit of live radio. Sometimes these things happen, and this morning I also had some tech issues as well. We weren't able to get Jo to call in, but she will be on my mobile phone, so we're going to give this a go. So my next guest... My next guest is Jo Howard. She's a certified coach helping teachers who have burnt out escape the cycles of overwhelm and underwhelm to help them fulfill their potential and be happy on purpose. So let's give this a go, Jo. Can you hear me? Jo, you okay?
Yeah, I'm there.
Right,
Hi.
okay. In the studio, can you hear Jo clearly? Thank you. Right, okay. Jo, how are you? It's nice to have you on the show this week.
Oh, so thank you so much, Sobia, for inviting me on. I'm really excited to be here with you. Despite the tech issues, we're doing it and we're here, and yeah, really happy to be here. So thanks so much for inviting me.
Definitely. It was really funny when I received your message saying that I've got a new puppy and I'm really exhausted all the time. I found it hilarious, and I was like, yep, this is definitely the person I want on my show.
Yeah, it's downstairs at the moment, but yeah, I did my stint in the kitchen last night, so yeah, fresh face this morning.
What type of puppy is it, Jo?
He's a Springer. He's 9 weeks old, so yeah, a bundle of energy at the moment, but he's getting there. Yeah, he's very, very cute.
Okay,
to be outside.
That's really cute. Okay, Jo, can you tell us a bit about yourself and your career history? What is your role and what do you do?
Yeah, great. So I am a primary trained teacher. I did about 15 years in the state and private sector, really loved it. My specialism was always literacy difficulties. So I did a master's very much supporting children who really struggled to read and write, and training other teachers to support them. So really that Senko literacy role. But found myself that I just experienced those cycles of overwhelm over and over again. And I was my own worst enemy, basically. So really driven, had lots of success, but was always taking on too much and overcommitting. I never worked in an unsupported school at all. I've always worked with really supportive teams, but I just was my own worst enemy. And I really struggled to leave because I was so wrapped up in the identity, as a teacher. When we're a teacher, that's all we know, isn't it? So it can be really hard to think of ourselves doing and being anything else. But yeah, I just really knew there was another way, and the part of my job I always loved coaching, developing other people. So I deliberately set out to find a coaching cert that really supported burnout and helping people to heal from burnout. So I trained as a coach early last year, which really helped me understand my drivers and my cycles of burnout, and then set myself up since, really. So really helping teachers one-to-one who are recovering from burnout, so helping them to heal from those cycles, or helping teachers supporting them to get a new job, basically, to get outside of teaching or to start their own businesses. So really to have that new adventure, which has been really, really exciting. Basically, the role is to get them to a place of confidence again, because that is what is sorely lacking when they don't know what to do. So very much getting them to a place where they can decide to stay or go. So whilst I'm not in the the job of helping them, persuading them to leave. If they've made that decision, I really want them to have somebody who is supporting and advocating for them, really.
Yeah, that's lovely, because I remember, and I've mentioned this in a previous show, that I did feel burnt out once, and there have been other members of staff who have felt burnt out and they've not known where to turn to or what to do. And one of the tweets that I put out recently was, your career should not be your identity, because I do remember at that time my career was my whole identity, and when that identity was gone, it kind of shattered me, and then I had to re-find things that made me, rather than things that were career based. In terms of burnout, can you just explain to everybody what is burnout? What are the signs and causes of it?
Yeah. So burnout is an occupational condition, so it's not a medical condition. I think the key thing with burnout is that it's a continuum, and it is a state of mind that comes with that long-term unresolved stress, and that's the key. It's that there's the stress that we're carrying daily, and we're not completing that stress cycle. We're not releasing it, and it becomes very, very heavy. So in terms of it's not necessarily going to be some huge dramatic mental breakdown. As I said, it's more of a continuing symptom. When I was at State University, they did some amazing research that identified burnout as being in 5 stages. I'll just quickly run through them because I think it's helpful. That first stage is very much almost like that honeymoon stage, which I think I've kind of touched on, where you're really excited about a new role or a new task, and you're just giving your all. Basically, there's a real high productivity, real compulsion to prove yourself, which I think is really keenly seen in teachers. And then there starts this onset of stress where you might start getting a bit irritable, lack of sleep, you starting to avoid decision making, starting to get headaches, maybe tension in the shoulders, that sort of thing. And it keeps on building up until we then see potentially social withdrawal. There may be more of a cynical attitude to work, that real chronic exhaustion. And it's at this point when we start seeing those signs of potentially, not doing any hobbies anymore, not seeing people, feeling ill more regularly, just not being able to feel rested at all, that burnout is starting to onset, really. Also watching out for things like increased alcohol and caffeine consumption, needing those stimulants, those kind of wants as needs, can start snowballing. So in terms of seeing it in yourself and others, I suppose it is that rumination on things at work and an inability to be able to switch off, really, not having those physical and emotional, energetic boundaries between you and work. And as you said, Sobia, that identity being completely consumed in being a teacher, that's all you are. But it's the physical as well as the mental impact it can have on you. But it's something like, there was a recent study of the Office Group said that the average worker is most likely to experience burnout by the age of 32. Isn't that crazy? 32.
Yeah, but I guess that's kind of our working lives now anyway, because I started teaching when I was 25, I think 24 or 25. I started straight from university, basically. I took a year out and then I started to do almost automatically. And one of the things that I found when I was training and when I came into the profession, and obviously I'm not an ECT now, so I don't know what it's like now. But at that time, there was very little on well-being, and there was very little CPD on how to manage yourself and how to manage your lifestyle and how to balance your career, because there were some schools that you work in that are good, some that are not so good. It all depends on where you end up. And I think for me, what you've just said is the continuous build up, because sometimes it hits you because you don't realize, you don't spot the signs leading up to it, and then it's not until it gets to a breaking point when you realize, wow, how did I miss all those signs? And you just can't function anymore. So how would you recommend staff get over burnout? Because I know for me, it took a good few years for me to get back to the normal health and well-being that I expected for myself in terms of physical and mental health. Like, how should staff be dealing with this?
Yeah, I think it's like you say, it's recognizing those signs. I mean, I frequently have teachers saying, they're crying on the way to work, can't think straight, making mistakes. So it's those signs, that brain fog, really, and the dread of going to work. I think the main thing is space, which can obviously be quite difficult to get unless you're actually having a break from work. But learning how to pause and rest is a huge thing. I don't think many of us really know how to truly stop and be comfortable with with ourselves and our own company. But I do a lot of work with thought tracking, for example, understanding the cynicism and the negative thinking patterns that you've kind of got into, recognizing that those kind of critical voices in your head aren't you, and how to detach from them is a huge part of it, I think, to start feeling more positive, more resilient. And on the back of that is learning to be more compassionate, self-compassionate, recognizing that harsh voice and understanding how you can talk to yourself more kindly, give yourself the space. And it is more than having the bubble bath, etc. It's having really firm boundaries around what you're prepared to do and not do, and being okay with saying no to things, which is another really difficult thing as a teacher, isn't it? Prioritizing ourselves over other people, because we don't do that. But with my clients, it's really trying to get them to a place of seeing that if they say no, they can then say yes. It is that idea of putting your own oxygen mask on first, and if you don't do something now about it, as you said to me, it can take years to recover. It really can. And there may still be those sort of energetic hangovers for people that are burnt out. There'll be triggers for them. So again, with that compassion, being aware that they may still be there, and that's okay. And you learn how to self-regulate, I think, is the key. So however that works for you, whether that's meditation, walking, all those classic ones. But the biggest thing is having someone to talk to. I think coaching can, change the face of teacher retention, and can hugely help people recover from burnout. They desperately need somebody to help them unpick kind of the pickle they've got into.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that somebody asked me is, why are you doing a show on burnout and encouraging teachers to leave? And I said to them, that I wasn't encouraging teachers to leave, because obviously as a profession, as educators, we should be helping and supporting them and encouraging them to stay. However, it does get to a stage, and I know because I felt like that in the past as well, it does get to a stage where you don't want to teach anymore. And then in that respect, you do need someone to help you to move on, because I know that I didn't have anyone to help me move on, the first time. So at what stage do you get involved, Jo? Do you get involved when they're burnt out and they're looking for coaching to stay within the profession, or whether they're looking to leave the profession? What is exactly the support that you give to the staff that come to you?
Yeah, so I started out very much as focusing on helping them make the decision, because exactly as you just said, I really didn't want to be almost promoting that people leave the profession, and I found it really difficult to start even marketing myself doing such. However, the more people I coach one-to-one, I'll start by saying, sorry, first of all, there are a lot of people I have coached that have come to me not sure they can carry on and do it anymore. And by working on things like their boundaries, prioritizing, their workload, what they want out of their career, etc., we've got them to a point where they have built their resilience and they've stayed, which has been brilliant. So I have definitely supported teachers to stay, but more and more teachers were coming to me, sort of they've burnt out, several times, have been signed off 3 times with long-term stress, basically, and they're still in that mind of like, well, when I get better, I'll go back. And you're like, but actually, the best thing for you and the children probably at this point is to leave. And that I don't feel there's anybody advocating and saying it is okay to say you've done an amazing job, but now it is time for you to do something different and look after yourself. The teachers really feel they need this permission to leave and to put themselves first. And there are a lot of coaches out there, focused on retention. So I really passionately feel at the moment that with the group support I've got in Adventures After Teaching, which that's a free Facebook group, and I'm interviewing loads of teachers in there that have moved on and started businesses, have got really amazing careers, some of which using their teaching skills. For example, Paul Rose, he's got an ed tech company and he's supporting children, their parents who are deaf to access amazing high quality materials. Lots of examples how people are using their teaching experience but outside of the school setting. So they're still serving really passionately, but they're just not in that classroom environment anymore. So I do a mixture of one-to-one coaching, either supporting teachers to heal from burnout. You know, I said they might end up staying. That's fantastic if they can sustain that. Or I help them see that actually they've done a great job and it's time for them to do something else. And then we look at their transferable skills. We look at the job market, the different types of jobs that they can go to if they want to keep within the education sector. So it might be curriculum development, for example. It might be project management. There's so many amazingly interesting jobs out there for teachers. And I help them with interview prep, etc. and lots of them go and secure, you know, exciting jobs. Or I help them to think about starting their own business alongside teaching as a way also of transitioning out. But the burnout recovery is my passion. So throughout everything I do is a real focus on helping them heal their nervous system, basically, and learn how to self-regulate. So my one-to-one coaching patch is normally 6 to 12 weeks, but my group program, Adventures After Teaching, is a full community support group coaching program, which is going really well. I'm really excited about it, and it's on the back of what they've asked for. So it's that hand-held approach to healing the burnout and then helping them either secure a job or start a business. That's
Jo,
really exciting at the moment.
Sorry to interrupt you. Can you just give us an example of one client that you might have supported, what their story was, how you supported them, and what kind of topics you covered with them? Because obviously different people come with different stories. It would be nice to hear about an example of someone coming to you.
Yeah. So I just had Lauren come to me recently, and she's gone back to work having had her children. I was just finding more and more that balancing the job and her young children at home, it was becoming more unmanageable. She couldn't put in the hours anymore that she was before. So, you know, the successes that she was having, she was finding she was having to compromise the amount that she was putting in and just spreading herself far too thin. But she really didn't feel that she knew what to do, what else she could do. It was very had always been a teacher and had always identified as being a teacher. So we talked about sort of things that, you know, lit her up, part of the jobs that she really enjoyed, and it was actually working with children with additional needs, and she had a wealth of experience working with, you know, additional support in loads of different ways with behaviour, emotional regulation, you know, literacy difficulties. So we found different SEND case officer jobs, and she applied for one in her local authority, and I helped her write her statement, and we looked at, you know, all the transferable skills from teaching, really highlighting examples of how she met that job specification, and then I also coached her through the interview process as well, like really building her confidence and kind of like embodying those times in the past, you know, she had successfully, you know, supported children, adults, written programs of development, etc. And so she secured the job, and she's starting in September, and she's really excited. But there was a lot of coaching to be done around, you know, could she do it? How different it would be. She'd only ever kind of worked in a school. She'd gone from school to university, back to school, and I think that's so common, isn't it? For so many of us, we think that the outside world is where the grown-ups are doing the real jobs, and we haven't been there before, and it can be quite terrifying. And a lot of my clients do experience that. So there's always that balance between really building confidence back up again in their ability outside of the school environment, because I think a lot of people feel quite institutionalized. They don't know anything else, and particularly when they're in a very negative and cynical space, it can take quite a lot to step back from that, I think, and see their potential and their skills and their experience again with from an outsider's perspective, if you like.
So why do staff usually get to this point where they want to leave? Because you know, shouldn't senior leaders be trained in dealing with staff like this before they get to this point and supporting them? I mean, they should be trained to see the signs, right?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing I hear time and time again with clients is that they don't feel they can be honest about how they're struggling. You know, and senior leader, I've been a senior leader myself. I've managed quite a large team, and, you know, being accessible, having that open communication, and encouraging people to come to you when they're struggling is obviously absolutely key. But I think for a lot of staff, in the extreme, there's almost like this gaslighting that you just got to get on with it. This is the job. It's so much of it, isn't it? It's like, this is the job. This is what you signed up for. Other people are coping, and we are not allowed to say, actually, I don't want to be marking books until 11 o'clock at night. So this idea of, well, if you're doing that, then you're not being efficient enough. It's down to you. And I think there's so much to unpick there. You know, having clear marking policies and expectations of on teachers' time outside of school. How much should they be doing? What is acceptable? So it's not then feeding into this competition and comparisonitis between teachers, where we're constantly being told we're not good enough and that we need to improve. And yeah, I'm all for growth mindset, but when that means we can't say that we have mental health difficulties, there's something seriously wrong, isn't there?
But also, I think there's an element of trust. Like when you're in a senior leader position, you need to have established that trust between you and your staff, because it's no good saying, oh, okay, well, I set up a wellbeing session, but no one turned up. But there's a reason why people aren't turning up. If you haven't established that communication and open communication and trust between them, they're not likely to come to you anyway. And also, I find for me, I agree with you about systems. I think systems are very, very important. There's no point throwing, free yoga sessions if you're not going to improve on your systems and think about how staff are working on a daily basis. Because that does contribute to it. And I would agree with you. There are some schools that take it on board, and some senior leaders who are really, really good at, having these things in place. And there are some schools who just tell you to get on with things, which clearly isn't working. And my main concern is, if that is happening a lot, then teachers are walking out of the profession, which is the opposite of what we should be doing, really.
And there's so much online about supporting pupils, quite rightly, to self-regulate, identifying signs of trauma, etc. But if that language was also applied to teachers, I just think we may be in a healthier position. When we're talking about self-regulation, we're also talking about the adults learning to self-regulate in the school, and the children are aware that the adults also experience stress, and that CBT model of understanding that your thoughts do contribute to how you feel and to your behaviour. And if we all have that language to work with, then it's not a sort of them and us between the teachers and the children's mental health being the priority.
And I do think in schools where there are tough situations like behaviour, it does come to the fact that, staff do need to feel supported in all aspects of their roles, because obviously that contributes to emotional stress, and then the emotional stress can actually lead to long-term burnout as well. Jo, you said that you helped people set up their own businesses. What kind of opportunities are there for teachers outside of the profession who just want to take a move out of the classroom? You mentioned a few earlier. Can you just recap and just go through what kind of things they could do?
Yeah, so in terms of transitioning job-wise, there are education support officer roles both in local authorities, so looking at virtual schools for children that perhaps can't access mainstream education, or send case officers that go in and negotiate between the local authority and the schools to make sure that provision is effective for children that have additional needs. There are loads of opportunities in the charity sector, really interesting like programme officer roles, curriculum support roles, like writing curriculum and resources. I've certainly done that freelance myself. So like the National Literacy Trust, I've done quite a lot of work with them, really interesting projects. In terms of setting up businesses, I've got a lot of people in the Adventures After Teaching group that are interested in proofreading, copywriting, content writing. So we're looking into different free courses that they can access. But there's a lot of advice, experience sharing going on, which is so nice with the podcast I'm putting together, that so many teachers are coming in and talking about their experience of setting up their businesses and passing that wealth on, which is fantastic. So a lot of writing based. Obviously, lots of teachers go on to set up tutoring agencies. either just themselves or employing other people, or parental support as well, whether that's, with maths anxiety, or mindfulness, mental health as well. So there's a huge wealth of things that people are doing. So I'd recommend coming in and looking at some of the interviews. Just fantastic wealth. Careers advisors. We've had a baker come in and talk that started their own business. So many different.
That's really good, Jo. Just to finish off, last couple of questions. Where can people get more support from if they've decided that they are ready to move on from the profession and they want to step out of the classroom?
Yeah, so I mean, on my website, betterthanburnout.com, I've got a free mini course, a stay or go mini course, which was very much developed for people that are just undecided. So that will help you really think about where you want to be sort of in the next 3 years, what your transferable skills are, etc. I've got the Adventures After Teaching is a free Facebook group, which is a really supportive community. And as I said, there's lots of interviews with ex-teachers, and the podcast will be released in September. If you need support in terms of feeling really burnt out, you can obviously look at the education support website or go to your union as well and get their advice. But I would say if you are concerned about your anxiety, your sleep, digestive problems, please do go and see a doctor. And just let them piece the puzzle together, because as we've said, often there can be quite a few different signs that we're kind of ignoring, and if it is showing up physically, I would say please go and just have a chat with your doctor. Doesn't mean you're going to be signed off, but just for your own peace of mind, I'd certainly recommend that as well. But do check out betterthanburnout.com and come and have a look at the Adventures After Teaching group. There's so much free support in there.
Thanks for that. And also, what's next for you then? Are you going to carry on with the coaching? Are you going to move into something else? What are your plans?
Yeah, so at the moment, I really want to make sure the podcast is that high value free support that all teachers will be able to access. So I want to continue, talking to amazing ex-teachers that have gone on to do both education related stuff and not. And I'm just doing my group program at the moment, which will reopen in October. So that's going to be, as I said, it's a group coaching program supporting people, firstly, to face the burnout and heal from it, and also to either find them a new job, secure that job, or to start their own business. So that's going to be open like on a termly basis, and that's a real handheld experience. The community aspect of it is brilliant. And just giving ongoing business support to teachers that have transitioned out, and doing a one-to-one. So lots there. But continue to do a one-to-one. I'm doing a CBT hypnotherapy course at the moment to support teachers more fully with the anxiety and PTSD. So
using hypnotherapy techniques.
Yeah, so because it's cognitive behavioural hypnotherapy, in terms of the evidence base, it's really strong, and combining CBT with hypnotherapy is even more powerful. So I'm seeing really significant gains in that as well, in quite a short space of time. So when I'm qualified in the next few months, I'm hoping to do more intensive work one-to-one with teachers that have really suffered and are signed off sick, and get them back to balance, as it were.
Great. Thank you so much for coming in today, Jo, and giving us all that information. And if you would like to find out, you can go onto her website, which is betterthanburnout.org, was it?
.com.
So you can find her there, or you can find out more information from your union, and also do like Jo said before, do check out things with your doctor as well if you're not sure. Thank you so much, Jo, for coming in. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you today.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me. Hope everyone has a great day.
Brilliant. Thank you. Right. Okay. Thank you so much for turning up today and for supporting me. I know there are people who have supported me today, so thank you. I do really appreciate that. It's been a really, really interesting show today. I've really enjoyed talking to Sobia, and I've really enjoyed talking to Jo. I've learned lots new information that I wasn't aware of, and I hope you have too. As usual, if you have anything to tweet or post or ask questions about afterwards, you can find me at Sobia Stella S or at TT Radio 2021. it would be nice to hear your thoughts. And next week, we will be going over, just to give you advance warning, I will be talking about challenging the system, how to work in a challenge the system, but also work in a productive way within it. Thank you so much for listening today. Have a great weekend. We've got Graham, and we've also got James Clark, and we've got Dr. Hareen coming up next. Take care. Thanks, Genevieve. You too. And Noam, thank you.
You've been listening to Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live and listen back at ttradio.org. We look forward to hearing from you next time on Teachers Talk Radio.